1995?
No, it wasn't. There was no internet in 1995.
Stuff on that don't have dial-up, but you could have asked Jeeves. You know.
I had dial-up, by the way. Hey, this is Davin with Hagerty, our Redline Rebuild updates. Last time we put the crankshaft and all that stuff into the mini block, and we said we were going to roll over to the transmission because we were late on getting some bearings. We had a little glitch in the parts. However, we didn't even get to the transmission. We're back to the bearings because the bearing came in a whole lot quicker than we expected, so that's a good thing. So we have them right here. One of the things we've talked about as we were doing this before is because I can't use the bore gauge in this because it's too small for the bore gauge. So I was using the snap gauge, and the snap gauges are not the most accurate in my humble opinion. So at least as far as like a real mic is concerned. So I had to resort to my least favorite, if you will, is plastic gauge, but it's better than absolutely nothing. And there's plenty of people out there that use it religiously, and that's fantastic. So as I was installing this, as I was mocking the piston rod assembly up on there with our new bearings, I'll be quite honest, I was a little nervous because it felt a little too tight. But as you're going to see, measuring the plastic gauge method, that actually our clearance is pretty decent. All right, so the deal with plastic gauge is you clamp everything together, it squishes out. You're relying on a bunch of stuff that I'm not confident in. And now you come through and you compare it. And now it's a judgment call of what I see versus other people may see. But this is obviously greater than 1. And it's smaller than 2. But it's right about 1.5. Which in normal circumstances, I would say 1.5 would be way too tight on rods. But the general rule of thumb is 1/1000th of oil clearance per 1 inch of shaft diameter. Our shaft diameter is 1.6, so our oil spec would be 0.0016. So call it 16 thousandths. I know that's not the right statement, but you get the point. Any rate, so our oil clearance is good. I need to take and get these bearings swapped out of the other 3 rods and get them ready to assemble into the block. And at that point, we'll pick up our time lapse and get this done quick. Well, I have to say this is one of the smallest car engine I've ever built, or at least attempting to build. All right, so at the very beginning of our update, I was a little concerned about bearing clearance. Went through, checked everything, verified it, I should say, with the plastic gauge. Again, not the best way to do it, but it's certainly a reliable way to do that. And but my concern was I didn't have enough clearance, which after I look at the bore size and my journal size, 1.5 will be sufficient. Now, if I needed it, my real concern wasn't the fact that the bore was, or I should say the crankshaft was cut wrong. It was more that the bearings didn't come in where they, I'll say, should. But everything has a tolerance, so that's basically where things lined up. And at this point, we're able to put the pistons in. Everything turns nice. Nothing feels like it's hanging. As far as the bearings are concerned, again, we got plenty of oil clearance with the small journal. So we are moving forward. All right, so it's been a few weeks since we tore this apart, so I'm kind of going back through those photos I told you that are quite important, and just trying to piece this all back together as far as how it looked, where this was positioned, and of course what bolts went in what spots. And then, so between the ones on my phone, and then I also printed off a cheater board here, so I have a little bit bigger version, or at least sometimes quicker to come and look at than trying to find it back on my phone. So with that, we're gonna move on to some timing. Get messy. Here's my rockauto.com tip of the day. When you're using paper gaskets, and really some of those cork gaskets, they tend to weep a little bit after they're on. I like to put a little bit of sealant on both sides, and it provides a very good leak-proof seal at that point. All right, well, we're gonna move on here after we have our timing cover on. We're gonna move on to our water pump assembly and then get our crank pulleys and balancer on there. Now, one thing to note, any aftermarket part, or actually any OE part, always make sure it fits where you, well, want it to be. So for instance, when I took this out of the box, it would stick about that high up on these locating pins. Now, what the issue was, this is a die cast part, so you're going to have natural radiuses, otherwise you can't get it out of the mold or the casting part. So at any rate, this hole needed to have a secondary operation that basically gave it a flat like our pin is, opposed to a big radius. So I sacrificed a drill bit on the belt sander, and that allows me to come in here by hand and just basically take that radius out, make it a sharp corner, closer to what my locating dowel is, and now it goes down all the way nicely. That's that. All right, roll the time lapse. Let's get this in. All right, well, here we go. I'm gonna say we have our short block assembled. It's pretty stinking close. Now, we learned a couple things. A, don't just throw parts on there, because just in case they don't fit right. And B, you know, we read through the comments, and at the same token, you don't see everything that we do, and so far nothing's been stuck to my brain to telepathically, you know, establish what I'm thinking. So my thought process relative to the shaft, or the short shaft here for the distributor, was just in case I couldn't put it in after the crankshaft was in, because this is the first time I've done one of these motors, that I would put it in then. And you know what, right after that, I looked at it and said, you know what, I'll never be able to time it if I can't take it in and out, so I must be able to. So that's why it's no longer in there. But didn't make a cool shot that you could actually see how the distributor gear engaged with the camshaft. That's not something you can normally see, at least not in the fashion that we had it in this engine. Secondly, there's always a discussion or question about what are you using for lubrication on this part, that part, and everything else. I use a gamut of everything, quite honestly. So any kind of threads that take torque, I'm always using some sort of ARP. The Ultra Torque stuff works very well. This is standard old engine oil. It happens to be an SA30 because I have a whole bunch of it in the cabinet. And then I use assembly lube from Redline. And then I like to use any wheel bearing grease. It's typically this blue stuff from Kendall, but that's all personal preferences. And then again, we talked about sealing up gaskets and so on and so forth. And there's all kinds of products out there that are good. I use different ones for different situations, and quite honestly, if it's Monday versus Wednesday or what I have in hand. So I've used anything from the ultra black, I've used the orange, I use the clear, I use the red, depending on the circumstances, and then of course the right stuff as well. This is convenient from a standpoint I can get just a smidge out. It's inconvenient because, well, it's can dry up, and so do these. But at any rate, that'll kind of wrap things up here for today. But just to give you an idea, we wanted to recap some of the stuff that we have seen questions relative to online and address those. Again, we're watching. So keep posting stuff, ask questions. It's cool. And guess what? For all you guys that know this and you've done all this, there's somebody in there that's reading that going, huh, never thought of that. Cool. I learned something. And that's the point. And now the point is get out in the shop and get your work done. And if you're just sitting on the couch, go buy a project and do something. See ya.